In today's video, I'll be doing a Clash Royale tier list where I'll be ranking every single card in Clash Royale and every evolution for the month of August. At the beginning of the month, we have gotten balance changes, and we also have a new Suspicious Bush card that was added to the game, and also the Goblin Cage evolution. So since then, the meta has definitely changed a decent amount. As always, S tier means the card is incredibly versatile and might mean that it needs a nerf because it's very OP. A tier means the card is well above average. B tier is the upper end of average. C tier, the lower end of average. D tier means the card is below average by a good amount. And F tier means the card is not versatile at all, pretty weak, and could possibly use a buff. Starting off with the archers, and I'm referring to the regular archers. The evolutions, I'll be ranking them all at the end. The regular archers are going in D tier. They're pretty much only used in Expo, and I think they're overall pretty weak, especially with how prevalent arrows are in the meta, which counter them super easily. The Baby Dragon will go in B tier. It's a pretty decent splash card, especially inside of graveyard decks, but there are a lot better options like the Phoenix, for example, but it is nice to have as a support card in some decks paired with the Tornado. The Balloon is going in A tier, definitely one of the best win conditions in the game. You can use Loon Cycle, Lumberloon Freeze, or of course pair it with the Lava Hound, but because there are a lot of buildings in the meta and Cannoneer has kind of been making a return recently, it's not super broken, which is why it's not an S tier. The Bandit will also be going in A tier. She's in an amazing spot at the moment because of how good Pekka bridge spam is. She's great for pressuring and gets a lot of value for only 3 elixir. You can also use her in some other bridge spam decks with the Mega Knight if you want as well. The Barbarian Barrel is going in A tier too. There's a lot of decks you can use it in, especially inside of Beatdown. You can use it with the Electro Giant, with the Golem, inside of Graveyard, and recently a lot of people have been using it with the Pekka too. There's multiple ways you can use it. You can use it as a mini tank when you're sending in a push. You can also try to get a tiny bit of chip damage with it, and you can also use it defensively with that Barbarian too. The Barbarian Hut is going in F tier as always. It is just too expensive and does not get enough value. It is too vulnerable to spells like the Earthquake, the Void, the Poison, and it's just hard to fit inside of any deck, which is why it has been bad for such a long time. The regular Barbarians are going in D tier. There's not a whole lot of people using them anymore outside of Lava Hound because they died to Fireball, and overall the main reason why people play them is just to get to their evolution, which of course is significantly stronger, but the regular ones are just fairly weak, and there's so many better things you can use like the guards. The Bats are going to be going in B tier. They're a pretty cheap card that can get a good amount of value in a lot of situations, but they do die to spells pretty easily, and they're quite weak, but they can be nice to have inside of Mortar decks or with the Goblin Giant, or sometimes with minor wall breakers, so they're kind of versatile in a few decks. And the arrows are going in S tier. It's insane because at the beginning of this month, they nerfed the amount of damage that the arrows deal to towers, and that has not really affected anything. They are being played so much. They're incredibly versatile. You can use them inside of Pekka. You can use them inside of Mortar, Giant, Goblin Giant, you name it. There's so many different decks you can run it in, whether it's Beatdown, Control, Cycle. Their radius is just so large, and they get a ton of value, especially later on in the match in double and triple elixir when there's so many things going on. They're guaranteed value pretty much every single time, and the nerf has hardly done anything. The healer's going to be going in F tier. No one is really playing her anymore. All the Golem decks don't really have healer anymore, and Elixir Golem doesn't use healer anymore either. Elixir Golem players are using the Skeleton King and the Evolved Wizard instead, which means the healer is practically useless. The regular Battle Ram is going in D tier. It does pair very well with the Pekka, but basically everyone using the Battle Ram is using the evolved version because the regular one is so hard to get to the tower. Buildings stop it so easily, and there's so many stuns in the game, which is why it's not a very reliable win condition unless you're using it evolved. The regular bomber's going in A tier. It is a cheap card that is pretty versatile. You can use it inside of cycle decks, like inside of the Goblin Drill, for example, but you can use it in heavier decks too, because it pairs well with the Lava Hound and also inside of Goblin Giant. And there's many people using the regular one, not even the evolution, because the regular one is pretty good itself. The bomb tower will also be going in A tier. It is one of the best buildings at the moment and has been making a bit of a comeback recently after the evolved drill came into the game, because that pairs very well with it. You can also use the bomb tower inside of Hog or inside of Loon Cycle, and it is a very sturdy defensive building that does splash and has a lot of health. The bowler's going in A tier too. It has so much health and it throws its boulder so far, so it kind of is almost a secondary win condition if you get it to cross over the bridge and line up with a unit. You especially see it be very strong inside of graveyard decks, also with Giant and the Goblin Giant, and it is such an annoying card that a lot of people hate playing against. The cannon will be going in B tier. I think it is slightly worse than the bomb tower at the moment, but still a very good building that is seen a lot inside of Hog and also Royal Hog Cycle. It's fairly cheap too, so it does tend to get a lot of value for only 3 elixir, especially against ground win conditions. Believe it or not, guys, the cannon card is going in A tier. It went all the way from C to A. It was an average card, but it got a buff in the last set of balance changes, which has helped the card quite a lot, which is why so many people are using it again, especially inside of Mortar. It has great synergy, and also inside of Logbait. The other thing that really helped it is the Dagger Duchess nerf, because the Duchess was really good against it. So now we're seeing the cannon card shine again, and it is now an above average card. The clone is going in F tier. There's not really anyone running Lava Clone anymore or Giant Skeleton Clone. There's just too many counters to it, like the Tornado, the Poison, and of course all the arrows in the meta, making it practically useless. The Dark Prince will be going in B tier. Definitely not as good as the regular Prince, but that splash damage is nice, and he does have good synergy inside of Giant Double Prince. You can also use him with the Goblin Giant or inside of E-Giant if you want as well. The Dark Goblin will be going in B tier. Ever since he got that buff a few months ago, we have been seeing him a lot more again, especially inside of bait decks, and he is just a lot more annoying to deal with now, but he's definitely not super OP or anything, because outside of bait, you don't really see him. The Earthquake will also be going in B tier. I think it's a pretty average spell currently. It's very good with the Hog Rider and also the Royal Hogs, but a lot of people are preferring to use Void or the arrows over it, so I do think it's in a pretty balanced spot at the moment. The Electro Drag will be going in D tier. I feel like it's not used a ton currently. There's not many people using it with the Golem, or also Lumberloon Freeze is not being played a whole lot currently, so that means the E-Drag isn't getting much play time, so it's kind of in a weak spot. And I actually realized somehow, some way, there has not been a card in C tier yet, but that streak ends now because Electro Giant is going to be the first card going in C tier. I feel like he's kind of weak as a win condition, a bit below average compared to the others. I think a big part of it is because of all the buildings and also the rise of the cannon cart, which is very good against the Electro Giant as well. I think he's just having a hard time reaching the tower in this current meta, and there's a lot of better beatdown options at the moment, like Lava Hound, for example. I'm actually going to put the Electro Spirit in S tier. It's currently the best spirit in the game. It's even being used more than the Ice Spirit, because there's a lot of people running the Electro Spirit inside of Royal Giant, inside of Expo, with the Hog Rider, with the Goblin Drill. There's just a ton of different decks you can fit it in, and a lot of the decks it's being played in, it doesn't really matter if they get a King activation, so a lot of people are preferring that chain it's getting on multiple units, and it's just getting so much value for only 1 elixir. Incredibly versatile too. The Electro Wizard is going in C tier. He got a small buff this month in the balance changes where his spawn effect radius was increased a bit, which definitely helps him out a tad, but I still think there's a lot of support cards that are better than him, but he does pair very well with the Pekka, which he is used in a good bit. The E-Barbs are going in D tier. If you're not on mid-ladder, you will not be seeing these very often at the top of ladder or in competitive. When they're not over leveled, they're simply not really that good, and they're very easy to defend. The Elixir Collector will be going in D tier. It was very good at one point until Void got added to the game, and that practically killed it because now there's 2 direct counters to it. The Earthquake as well as the Void, making it incredibly matchup dependent because if you face one of those cards, which is a fairly high probability, it's getting pretty much no value. The Elixir Golem is going in C tier. It got toned down a tiny bit from last month after the Evolved Wizard got its nerf, which of course pairs very well with the Elixir Golem, but it is a way better win condition than it used to be because it pairs very well with the Void as well as the arrows, which are very strong, which has been helping it out quite a bit. The Executioner will be going in C tier as well. He pairs very well in Hog x NATO, also with the Balloon and the Goblin Drill you can use him in, so he's versatile enough, and I feel like he can get some really good value not only on defense, but also on offense, lining him up on the tower if you use the Tornado. The Fireball will be actually going in S tier. It is in a better spot currently than the Poison, especially because of how versatile it is, and I think because the Crown Tower damage was reduced that the Poison dealt, that kind of was an indirect buff to the Fireball. A lot of people are using it inside of Royal Giant. You can use it in Mortar, you can use it in Expo, you can use it inside of Hog Rider, you can use it inside of Lava Hound, Gob Giant, a lot of different things you can use the Fireball in. It's very nice to have that direct damage on top of units. Firecracker will be going in C tier. I know a ton of mid-ladder players hate her, but high up on ladder and in competitive play, you pretty much only see her with the Hog Rider and inside of Recruit Spam, and it's kind of understandable why she's fairly easy to deal with, especially with how prevalent the arrows are in the meta, which take her out so easily. But remember, this is the regular Firecracker, not the Evolved. The Fire Spirit's going in B tier. It does deal a lot of damage for only 1 elixir, but currently there's not a whole lot of decks that it's being used in outside of Goblin Drill, and a lot of people are preferring to use the Electro Spirit and the Ice Spirit over it. The Fisherman's going in A tier. It's actually in a great spot in the current meta because a lot of people are using it not only inside of Royal Giant, but also with the Evolved Goblin Giant. So there's 2 decks that it is great in, and it's of course good for the King activations and also pulling things away from the win condition that gets you a lot of value. The Flying Machine's going in C tier. It's overall not that great, but it's slightly better than it was last month now that the Evolved Royal Recruits are a bit better. Now that the Dagger Duchess is worse, some people are using it with the Recruits again, which means it's used occasionally. The Freeze will be going in D tier, definitely a little better than the Clone because Freeze can be played with the Graveyard if you want, and also the Balloon, even though sometimes that is a bit off meta. The Archer Queen will be going in B tier. I would say she's about average as a champion currently, and she's very vulnerable to spells like the Lightning, of course, and also the Void, and I just think she's hard to fit in decks, which is why, for the most part, you only see her inside of that Royal Hog Cycle deck. The Furnace is going in F tier pretty much for the same reasons as the Barbarian Hut. It doesn't really fit well in any deck, and spells like the Poison and the Earthquake just wipe it out super easily. The Giant's going to be going in A tier. He has been one of the stronger win conditions recently, especially after the Prince buff, which pairs very well with him, and also, of course, inside of Giant Graveyard, which is a very OP combination. The Giant Skeleton's going to be going in C tier. I don't necessarily think it's a bad card. I think the main issue with the Giant Skeleton is it's just very hard to fit in decks. It's kind of the type of thing where it's like you're better off using a different support card, so a lot of times you see him inside of off-meta decks. The Snowball will be going in B tier, definitely a pretty decent spell, especially inside of Giant Graveyard or Graveyard in general. You'll often see it, and it can go very well with the Balloon because it's really nice to be able to push back and slow down units on your win condition to buy them more time to get more damage on the tower. The Goblin Barrel's going in C tier. I feel like there's not a lot of people using the regular Goblin Barrel. Most people playing it have the Evolved version because the regular one is just very easy to deal with, especially because of how many people are running Arrows, Log, and even the E-Spirit, going to all be pretty good answers to the regular Goblin Barrel. The regular Goblin Cage is going in C tier. I feel like it's not really that good, even though it has an evolution now. The main reason people are using the regular one is to get to the evolved one, but I feel like there's just so many better buildings, which is why the regular Cage, you're really only going to see with the recruits, but a lot of people are running recruits without a building, or you could use the regular Cage with the balloon, but again, a lot of people running balloon might be running the bomb tower or using it inside a lava loon. The Goblin Curse is going in D tier. Ever since it got that really big nerf, it just definitely has not been the same, and there's not really any deck that it's required to be used in, which is why you mostly see other spells being played because of it, and I can't even really think of a deck where you would even want to use it in. I mean, you could maybe run it inside of some bait spam deck if you want, but even that, you're probably better off using another spell. The Goblin Demolisher, on the other hand, is still very strong even after the nerf he received, which is why he's going in A tier. Especially with the Goblin Drill, the synergy is absolutely incredible, but he can also be used inside of some other control decks, like with the Pekka, it fits very nicely in, and just that fact that when he's at half of the health he explodes, he can be used on defense to defend things because of that explosion, or on offense, making it very good. The regular Goblin Drill, I'm going to put in B tier because I'll tell you guys what, there's almost no one playing the regular drill. Everyone using it is playing the evolved version, and the regular one is just significantly easier to deal with. It's not even close. I would say it's 3 times easier to defend, or like twice as easy at least, because the evolved one respawns a couple of times. The regular one, you don't have to worry about that, so if you're just playing one unit on it that does good against it, it's fairly easy to stop in that sense, which is why the evolved one is just way, way better and more threatening. And believe it or not, guys, the Goblin Gang, I don't know what has happened recently, but it is going in S tier. It has been running rampant in the meta. There are so many people using this card, not even just in log bait, which of course it goes very well in, but a lot of people are using it in recruit spam and also inside of Mortar. And Mortar is a lot better because of the Cannon Cart buff. So a lot of people are using the Goblin Gang with the Cannon Cart. You can also use it inside of Goblin Giant, the Gob Giant Prince spam bait deck as well. So there's so many different decks you can use it in, and I think it's better because they added that third Spear Goblin back recently, and also because of the Dagger Duchess nerf, because the Dagger Duchess was so good against it. Now it is absolutely OP, at least in this current meta. The regular Goblin Giant is going in C tier. The main reason people play it, kind of like what I said for the Goblin Barrel, is to get to the evolved version, which is getting a lot more value in a lot of situations. I feel like the regular one is a lot easier to stop, especially with buildings or a high DPS unit, so I think it is kind of an average win condition. The Goblin Hut is going in F tier. I mean, man oh man, the spawners every single time. Barb Hut, Furnace, Gob Hut. I feel like I'm just a broken record always repeating that. Honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing one of them get a small buff. I feel like they don't always need to completely suck. Even if it's something small, maybe give one of them a 2% hit points buff or something like that. The Goblin Machine is also going in F tier. I mean, it really fell off after they decided to smack it with 3 or 4 nerfs in a short span of time, and they gave it a small buff recently to help compensate for the nerfs, but that hasn't really done much, and there isn't really any deck you can use the machine in, so for that reason, that's why I have it in F tier. The Goblins are going in A tier. The reason I don't think they're in S is because I do believe the skeletons are being used a bit more at the moment, especially because of the evolved skeletons. And the Goblins, though, do a lot of DPS. They're very good. You could use them with the Hog. You could use them with recruits and a couple other things, maybe the Goblin Drill, but I don't think they're as broken as they were. The Golden Knight is going to go in D tier. I feel like he's probably the worst champion at the moment, or tied as the worst. There's just not really any deck he can fit in. I mean, sure, you could try to make it work. You could try to run some Goblin Drill deck with the Tornado, but even in that, you're better off running something else. He just has never really been the same in a long time, ever since they gave him the dash nerf, where it's just harder to get him to reach the tower now. The Golem's also going in D tier. I think it is for sure one of the worst win conditions in the game currently. It's just impossible to run, especially when the Elixir Collector is as bad as it is. If there's no Elixir Collector being good, then there's pretty much no Golem being good, because both of them are typically used together, and there's just not really a good Golem deck to use currently. The Graveyard is going in A tier. It is especially good inside of Giant Graveyard, and there's still some people running Splash Yard or Graveyard Freeze. Definitely not as broken as it used to be, but with the Cannoneer being played more and more recently, that is making the Graveyard a bit better, because the Cannoneer, of course, pretty bad against the Graveyard. The Guards will be going in A tier, kind of like the Goblins. They are a great support card to use, and the Guards, the difference between the Goblins is you often see them in heavier decks. The Guards are an amazing tool to have, especially with the Lava Hound. You can also use them inside of a Goblin Giant deck if you want, and in Mortar. The Heal Spirit's going to be going in D tier. Definitely the worst spirit. There's not really any deck it's required to be played in. You could use it in a Sparky deck if you want, but Sparky doesn't tend to use the Heal Spirit, and also Sparky's not even in an amazing spot itself, so the Heal Spirit is not really that great. The Hog's going to be going in A tier. There's a decent amount of people using it, as always, of course, inside of Classic 2.6, there's still a lot of people using it in that, and also inside of Hog EQ, it is played a good bit, and there's even some people using some off-meta Hog Freeze decks. The Hunter recently got a health buff. In the last balance change, I believe it was 6%, but honestly, that hasn't really done very much. I would definitely still say it is around C tier and probably a slightly below average card, because there's not really any deck you're going to see it in besides Royal Giant, and even after the buff in Royal Giant, you're still probably better off using a support card like the Phoenix. Believe it or not, guys, there's actually a decent amount of people using the Ice Golem at the moment, especially with the Hog, but not just the Hog. There's a lot of people using it in two different Balloon decks. The Balloon Cycle deck with the Bomb Tower, and also the Balloon Cycle deck with the Cage. And because of the Evo Cage, that is slightly more popular, the one with the Inferno Drag and the Minor Balloon. So the Ice Golem is actually in the best spot it's been in quite some time. The Ice Spirit's going to be going in A tier for sure, one of the strongest spirits in the game. I would say it's only slightly worse than the Electro Spirit, because if you're not running the Electro Spirit in a cycle deck, you're probably going to be running the Ice Spirit. That freeze duration you're getting is so helpful, especially when you're defending. Stalling something, buying you significantly more time to defend, and it just gets a lot of value for only one elixir. The Ice Wizard's going to go in C tier. Honestly, that last buff it got earlier this month, where it's dealing more splash damage when it shoots, it's helped it a tiny bit, but I think overall there's still significantly better support cards. But he is now seen again from time to time inside of Expo and also inside of Splash Yard, so he is a bit better for sure. The Inferno Drag is actually going to go in B tier. It's a tier lower than I usually put it. I think in this current meta, there's slightly less beatdown decks, like especially the Golem, and I think even slightly less Lava Hound and some other tanks like that. So there's slightly less people running the Inferno Drag, but it still, of course, is oftentimes used with the Lava Hound, where you often see it paired in. The Inferno Tower is going in D tier. I think it's currently one of the worst buildings in the game. It's kind of like why I said the Inferno Drag is slightly worse. There's not too many people running tanks like Golem and Electro Giant at the moment, so there's less of a need of using it in the first place. And also, the Evolved Tesla is just significantly better, so most bait players prefer to use that over the Inferno. The regular Knight, guys, I'm going to put in S tier, and this is the regular one, not the Evolved, because there's so many people using the regular variation, because the regular one has a lot of health and gets a lot of value for his stats, which is why it's very versatile and seen in a lot of decks. For example, he's seen in the Goblin Drill. You can use it with the Mortar. You can use it inside of Expo. You can use it inside of Log Bait. There's quite a lot of different things he can be paired in, and people want to save their evolutions for something else, which is why they have the regular one and not the Evolve, which proves not just the evolution is very good, the standard one very good too. The Lava Hound's going in A tier. It seems like no matter what the meta is, it always tends to have success. It, of course, pairs very well with the Balloon. It also has great synergy with the Arrows and the Void, which is why there's probably no surprise that it's a pretty solid win condition currently. The Lightning's going in C tier. I feel like it's definitely not in a great spot compared to what it used to be. You can use it with the Electro Giant if you want, or with Gob Giant if you really want to, but those decks are not very meta, especially Electro Giant, and Gob Giant tends to run other spells other than the Lightning, so it definitely has sizzled out of the meta a bit. I think after all the nerfs the Little Prince got and currently where he stands, I would actually say he is B tier, about on par with the Archer Queen. I mean, he can be played in some cycle decks if you want, or with Pekka, but definitely a big difference compared to before, and he is not actually the best champion now, believe it or not. The Lumberjack is going in D tier. I feel like he's not really that good because Lumberloon Freeze hardly anyone plays, and also Golem is in a bad spot, and those are the two main decks that he is seen in. The Magic Archer's going in A tier. It of course is good inside of Pekka Bridge Spam, and Pekka's in a good spot, and also he's very good with the Goblin Drill, and some people are running the Goblin Drill with the NATO and the Magic Archer, the Bomb Tower variation. The Mega Knight's going in C tier. I mean, you can use Mega Knight Wall Breakers if you really want to, or Mega Knight Ram Rider, but Pekka is just way better than the Mega Knight because of that extra DPS you're getting. The Mega Minion will be going in B tier. Definitely not as good as the Phoenix, but some people do prefer to run the Mega Minion just for that faster cycle, which is why it's used occasionally inside of Lava Hound and also with the Pekka. The Mighty Miner's going in B tier. I feel like he's kind of about the same as the Archer Queen and Little Prince in terms of strength. You can use him with the Hog Rider, and also inside of Recruits, he can pair pretty well in, but besides that, you don't see him too much, and even in those decks, you can use other things besides him if you want. The Minion Horde's going in D tier. I mean, with how prevalent arrows are in the meta, also the Fireball and Splash cards like the Evolved Wizard, it's probably not a big shock that they kind of suck, and there's not really many decks they can fit in. I guess if you really want to, you could use them inside of a Mortar Spam deck. Believe it or not, guys, the Miner is back and going in S tier. I think one of the things that really helped him out is the Dagger Duchess nerf. That was the main thing that kind of dropped him a tier for a while, but now that the Princess Tower and the Cannoneer are the better tower troops, the Miner can shine once again, which is why he has been seen so much inside of Mortar decks. Mortar especially has made a big comeback with the Miner, and of course he can be used with the Giant, he can be used with the Lava Hound, Balloon, a very versatile card, as you guys know, not necessarily a win condition, but with him being a secondary win condition and a great support card for tower chip, he is definitely S tier at the moment. The Minions will be going in B tier, definitely better than the Minion Horde because they cost less elixir, less risky to use, so if you're against arrows, they're still getting some value before they die, which is why they can be a nice card to have inside of things like Giant Graveyard and inside of Lava. Mini Pekka's going in C tier. I feel like it's not really played that much outside of Giant Sparky and also Hog Mini Pekka, and in those, it's oftentimes a substitute and not really a requirement either. The Mirror's going in F tier. I mean, you have to spend more elixir to play the same card. It makes your cycle very awkward. It has been bad for a very, very long time. The Monk will be going in C tier. I believe he's a bit better than the Golden Knight, but I would say he's worse than the other champions I have ranked. You can use him inside of Royal Giant if you want to, but most Royal Giant decks don't have him. You could use him with the Ram Rider if you want, but again, most Ram Rider decks do not have him, so overall there's not a big point in using him. The regular Mortar is going in B tier. In this meta, Mortar has been in a really good spot. Now, that's mostly the Evolved Mortar because almost everyone is using the Mortar. So it's kind of like the Goblin Drill, where the regular Mortar is a lot easier to deal with, but I would still consider the regular version at least an average win condition. And not even just a win condition, you can use it defensively as well to help you defend ground support cards where it gets a good amount of value. The Mother Witch will be going in C tier. She's pretty decent inside of some spam decks that are new, like with the Cannon Cart and also the Royal Hogs, but I don't think she's super OP overall. She's kind of just an average support card. The Musketeer will also be going in C tier. I think she can be decent with the Hog Rider and inside of Loon Cycle, but there's a lot of better options than her, which you often see instead, so she's just kind of on the average end. The Night Witch will be going in B tier. I think she's in a really solid spot currently because of Giant Graveyard, where she pairs very well, and she's also very good against the Cannoneer, and you can also use her inside of Elixir Golem, of course, where she combos very nicely in. The Pekka will be going in A tier. She has been a lot better ever since she got that range buff, which has helped her out a little bit, and also the Ramrider buff has helped her too, because the Ramrider of course pairs very well with the Pekka, but I definitely don't think she's absolutely broken, especially this month. She's being used slightly less, but she is still in an amazing spot, and the archetype has definitely been revived. The Phoenix will be going in S tier. It is just absolutely incredible in all the beatdown decks. You can use it with the Giant, the Royal Giant, the Goblin Giant, Pekka, Lava Hound. You could even fit it inside of a Mortar deck if you want. You name it. A very versatile card. It does a decent amount of DPS. That spawn effect it has with the egg can be pretty good as well if you have something tanking for it, and it just gets a lot of value in a lot of situations for only 4 elixir. The Poison is going in A tier. It is pretty good with the Goblin Drill, or you could use it inside a Splash Shard, but definitely not as good as the Fireball at the moment. I think ever since it got that nerf where it's doing less damage to Crown Towers, that has made it noticeably worse, because especially in Triple Elixir, you can't just constantly cycle poisons on the tower anymore and rely on that to win you the game. The Prince is going in A tier as well. It was an S tier, but then this month they decided to nerf the charge a little bit by half a tile, because they realized they over buffed the charge and it was too much when they buffed it by, I believe, 1.5 tiles is how much faster it charged. So it got toned back a bit, which means it is A tier, but it is very good, especially inside of Giant and the Evo Gob Giant. And then you can also use him inside of Prince Bait as well. Very, very good support card. The Princess will be going in B tier. I think she's in a decent spot at the moment, especially because the Evolved Goblin Barrel is pretty good that she pairs well with, and also the newly added Suspicious Bush is often paired with the Princess too, because she helps bait those spells. The Rage will be going in A tier. It is actually in a great spot in the meta. There's a ton of people using it, especially inside of Royal Giant and also with the Evolved Goblin Giant. You can also use it in some other things as well, like toxic things, especially like Elixir Golem, and I think it is in a pretty versatile spot currently. The Ramrider will be going in A tier. She's in a pretty good place currently ever since she got that charge buff. Kind of like the Prince, it was taken back by half a tile, but I still think she's a very strong win condition inside of Pekka, and there's also a few people using her with the Mega Knight too. The Rascals will be going in C tier. I think they're slightly better now after the Prince buff, because some people are using Rascals bait with the Prince, but I think they're overall fairly easy to deal with things like arrows and log, but that's often why they're used as spell bait. The Rocket will be going in B tier. It is, of course, a great spell inside of bait decks, inside of Expo, and there's even a few people running it inside of Hog X NATO too, which has been making a bit of a return recently, and it's kind of a secondary win condition, so it gets a lot of value in a lot of situations. The Royal Delivery will also be going in B tier. I feel like it's a pretty average spell. I mean, you see it in the Royal Hog Cycle deck. You could also use it, I guess, with Drill if you really want to, but it's not super versatile beyond that. The Royal Ghost will be going in A tier. He is absolutely incredible inside of Pekka Bridge Spam, which is seen a lot, and also inside of Royal Giant, and there's a few other spammy decks you could use him in if you want as well. That invisibility factor is very nice, as well as the splash, which is why he is being played quite a lot. The regular Royal Giant will be going in B tier. I think the Evolved Royal Giant is noticeably better in some situations, which is why almost everyone using the RG has that Evolved variation, which is why I think the standard one is definitely worse, because there's way more options of defending him. You can play your ground cards on him, for example, like a Skeleton Army or Goblins or something, or a Mini Pekka, and you don't have to worry about that knockback. The Royal Hogs will be going in B tier. I feel like kind of like the Royal Giant, they're kind of a average win condition currently. There's a lot of people using the Evo Recruits again, but a lot of people are running them without the pigs. They're kind of using it in a bait spam deck, but you do sometimes see the Recruits with the Hogs and Pig Cycle, but I think there's a lot of win conditions that are stronger than them in general, because there's a lot of great responses to the Royal Hogs, like the Fireball, for example. The regular Royal Recruits will actually be going in D tier. There's almost no one running the regular version. Pretty much everyone playing them is using the evolved version, which is why I think the standard version is D tier, because it's just significantly weaker and really easy to defend in most situations, because you don't have to deal with that charge effect, which is why when they're used, it's almost always the evolved version, especially on the top of ladder. The skeleton army is going to be going inside of D tier as well. I feel like it's just so weak to spells, and there's not really any deck it needs to be played in. You might see it in an off-meta deck occasionally, like some Balloon Freeze deck or Giant Graveyard, but you don't really need to use it. The Skeleton Barrel will be going in C tier. It's in a slightly better spot now that Mortar's back. There's some people using it with the Cannon cart and the Mortar, and also in Recruit Spam, you could see it from time to time. The Skeleton Dragons will be going in A tier. They are an absolutely incredible support and baity type of card, which is why you see them a lot inside of Mortar and also inside of Lava Hound, where they are an incredible support card. And the best champion in the game currently, guys, by far, it's actually not even close, at least this month, is the Skeleton King. He is being played so much inside of Mortar as it's been making a return with all the baity and spam cards he fits so well in, and also, of course, with Elixir Golem. He is always played, and you could use him with the Graveyard if you want as well. He just gets a absurd amount of value, especially with his ability spawning all those skeletons forcing a spell, which is why he fits so well inside of bait decks at the moment and is definitely the most powerful and versatile champion in the game. The regular skeletons will be going in A tier. I think I said I was maybe going to put them in S tier, but the regular ones are actually not too strong currently. Most people are using the Evo ones. There's not a whole lot of people just running these standard ones. It's about on par with the goblins, so for that reason, I'm going to put them in A tier, because I believe in this meta, you can kind of pick and choose which you want to use between the skeletons, the goblins, and the guards. They're all pretty similar. The Sparky's going in D tier, for sure in a bad spot at the moment, and it's probably not a big surprise, especially with Void still being very good, and also Rocket being in an okay spot, and just there's a ton of resets and stuns to it. It's really hard to get it to have value in a lot of matchups, which is why all the people running the Evo Gob Giant don't even run the Sparky in their deck. After the Dagger Duchess nerf and the recent Spear Goblin buff, the Spear Goblins are very good again, and they're actually going in A tier. They are very good inside of baity decks, of course, with the Mortar, also Recruit Spam, and I just think overall very versatile cards. You could also use them with the Drill as well, with the Magic Archer variation. The Suspicious Bush will be going in C tier. I think it's okay. The biggest issue is there's not really any deck where it's required in it. It's more so the type of thing where it's like you can use it if you want, and sometimes it can get value, and it's very situational. It really depends on the matchup, what your opponent has. So for that reason, I think it's kind of an average card. It really just depends. Sometimes it can be good, sometimes it can pretty much do anything, depending on if the person has a building, what spells they have, and things along those lines. The regular Tesla is going inside of B tier. Majority of people running the Tesla have that evolved version. There's almost no one running just the regular Tesla, especially after the nerf the regular Tesla got, where it actually isn't able to one-shot spirits anymore or one-shot minions, which has changed a few interactions. As per usual, the Log is going in S tier, amazing inside of cycle decks. If you're not running the arrows in the deck, you're probably running Log. That's pretty much how it works. You can use it with the Goblin Drill, you can use it with the Hog Rider, Royal Hog Cycle, you could use it in some heavier decks if you want to as well, like the Royal Giant, a lot of different things it fits in. It's just such a versatile spell, and pretty much that never seems to change, no matter what the meta is. Three Musketeers I'm actually going to put in F tier. I really don't know if they're ever going to be good again with the evolutions coming out in the game. Maybe they're a card where you could make the argument an evolution to them would be a nice way to make them stronger without actually directly buffing the regular Three Musketeers. Pump is in a really bad spot, which is another reason why they have just really fallen off the last few months. The Tombstone's going in B tier, not as good as it used to be, but you still see some people running it inside of Lava Hound and Splash Yard, again, which means it's kind of an average building. The Tornado will be going in S tier. I kind of swap this from A to S depending on the meta. I think it is, in this meta, very good, again, because of the Evo Drill Magic Archer Tornado deck. That is a deck where the Tornado is just so strong in, pulling things away from the Drill or lining up the Magic Archer with the Tower. Such an OP combination. And not only that deck, Hog X NATO has been making a return recently. Also Ice Bow because of the Ice Wizard buff, and of course inside a Splash Yard or Graveyard Freeze, you always see that Tornado, or in some decks like Lumberloon and things along those lines. Very, very solid spell for getting king activations and also for pressuring on offense. The regular Valkyrie will be going in C tier. This might be a surprise to mid-ladder players because a lot of mid-ladder players think she's really broken, but the thing is there's not really any deck that you have to use her in, and the reality is the Knight is just much better to be used in pretty much all the cycle decks you can think of, which is why there's not a whole lot of people using the Valk at the moment, except if they're running the Evolve Valkyrie, so they'll run the Valkyrie to eventually get to the Evolve version, which of course is a lot better inside of things like Lava Hound, where the Evolve Valk is really good in. And the Void, guys, is also going in S tier. I feel like every single time S tier consists of a lot of spells. That's usually how it is. Those spells tend to be very strong and versatile in the game, especially the good ones. The Void, even after the nerf, has still proven to be very good and versatile, especially just across the board in different decks. I mean, it's still very good inside of Lava Hound, but there's still a lot of people running it, for example, with the Giant and with the Pekka. You could run it with the Gob Giant as well. The only downside of it, I feel like, is cycle decks, which have a hard time pairing the Void in them, but the Void has still shaken up the meta a ton, and I believe it's the reason why things like the Archer Queen are kept in place, and also why the Elixir Collector is so bad. It's all because of the Void, which is kind of controlling the meta. The Wall Breakers are going to be going in B tier. They're a bit better after the Dagger Duchess nerf, but not many people are running minor Wall Breakers. The main time you see the Wall Breakers are going to be with the Recruits in Recruit Spam, or there's some people running Goblin Barrel Wall Breakers, but they are played a decent amount again. The Witch is going to be going in F tier. I feel like she's just for a while been one of the worst cards in the game, especially because of how good spells are against her, and there's not really anything you could pair her in. I mean, very off-meta Giant Graveyard decks maybe, but besides that, it's just going to be mid-ladder, so I wouldn't mind if they give her a small buff like they gave to the Wizard, which is up next, and the regular Wizard is going to be going in D tier. To be honest, that health buff they gave him where he survives the Fireball Zap now, I feel like he's slightly better, but he survives the poison. I feel like that made him slightly better, but I still think outside of mid-ladder, most top ladder players don't run just the regular one. They tend to have the evolved one, so for that reason, I still think the regular one isn't that good, but he's a tiny bit better. The Expo will be going in C tier. I don't think it's in an amazing spot. This is one that kind of fluctuates depending on the meta. I mean, Ice Bow made a tiny bit of a return because of the Ice Wizard buff, but I don't really think Ice Wizard is necessarily super strong. And then also 3.0 isn't really doing great either, so I would say it's kind of a below average win condition, but there's definitely win conditions that are worse than it. And I'm going to say the regular Zap is D tier. I really feel like it doesn't really get much value. The stun just simply isn't long enough, and you're just much better off even using spells like the Snowball, or especially the Arrows and the Log. And the main reason people use the Zap is, of course, to get to the Evolved version, which is just 3 times better. The Zappies are going to be going in D tier. They have been very weak for a long time, and even with the Evo Recruits being slightly better, people don't really use the Recruits in that deck, so I just think they're overall pretty bad, and they could even potentially use a tiny bit of a buff because I feel like they are kind of an interesting card and people wouldn't mind if they were slightly stronger. Okay guys, now on to the Tower Troops. This is kind of interesting, but I'm actually going to put both the Princess Tower as well as the Cannoneer in S tier, because between the two, I honestly couldn't tell you guys which is better. I think it is really dependent on the matchup, and to prove my point, when I'm checking the top 10 on ladder, which displays their Tower Troop on Royale API, half of the time there's more people in the top 10 using the Princess Tower, and then sometimes I check there's more people using the Cannoneer, and it's very dependent on the deck. The Princess Tower is better in decks, for example, like Lava Hound, Goblin Drill, Pekka, but the Cannoneer is very good inside of things like Giant Graveyard, or with the Mortar, for example, and both of them are very good when they're paired with the deck they fit well in, which is why I believe they are both very similar strength. You could argue the Princess Tower might be ever so slightly better, but it is quite close. I know a lot of casuals think the Cannoneer is not that good, but I'm telling you guys, the Cannoneer has been making a return recently, and there's so many pros that even think it is slightly better than the Princess Tower or are getting worried about it because they want the Princess Tower to be the best tower troop in the game. But I believe they're about equal, or the Princess Tower is ever so slightly better. But I'm having them both in S tier because I really want to make a point of how much better they are than the Dagger Duchess, which is going in B tier. The Dagger Duchess is significantly worse than these two tower troops because pretty much the only deck you are going to see the Dagger Duchess in is going to be Elixir Golem. And even inside of that, there's sometimes players who might want to run even the Princess Tower in that. But overall, the Dagger Duchess is way, way worse, which is why I have her 2 tiers lower, and this is my tower troop ranking at the moment and all the cards. Now we'll get into the evolutions. Now my evolution ranking is this. I only have 2 evolutions in F tier. The Evolved Barbarians have really fallen off as more and more Evos have been added. You pretty much only see them inside of Lava Hound, and even inside of Lava Hound, most people prefer to run the Evolved Valkyrie and the Evolved Bomber over the Barbarians. The Evolved Wall Breakers are also not really that good because there's hardly anyone using them more than the regular Wall Breakers. A lot of people are running the regular Wall Breakers actually and choosing to use 2 other evolutions in their deck, like maybe the Evo Firecracker or Evo Recruits over the Evo Wall Breakers because they're kind of the same in terms of defending them as the regular ones. The Evo Goblin Cage is a bit worse than I thought it was. I think it's a below average evolution for sure. I mean, it can be good in some decks, maybe with the Recruits or with the Balloon, but I think overall it's not guaranteed value in a lot of situations because it's really bad against air decks and also against ranged attackers. It's not doing anything because it outranges the Brawler's arm and they don't get pulled in. The Evolved Battle Ram is better than the regular Battle Ram, but it's still not really that great, which is why for the most part you only see it inside of Pekka, and it oftentimes is not a reliable win condition, especially because of the Evolved Tesla and other buildings and stuns that can make it hard to break through. The Evolved Ice Spirit is actually no longer the worst evolution in the game. Recently this month, it has been seen a decent amount inside of Royal Hog Cycle. There's even some people using it inside of Hog decks. Hog X NATO, especially you see it in, and even some people using it inside of Log Bait. So it has been actually making a bit of a comeback. The Evolved Archers are not that great ever since they made it so they die to arrows. They've been used less and less, which is why you mostly only see them in Expo now and maybe Giant Graveyard, but you're better off running other evolutions oftentimes in those decks. The Evolved Goblin Barrel is kind of a more average evolution. It originally was the worst evolution when it came out, but that's because of the Dagger Duchess. Now that the Dagger Duchess is way worse and there's a lot more people using the Princess Tower and the Cannoneer again, it means the Evolved Goblin Barrel is way better, especially inside of bait. The Evolved Bats are in a decent spot at the moment, especially with the rise of Mortar and Baity decks coming back in the meta. The Evolved Bats have been very, very solid and quite versatile in those decks. The Evolved Recruits are also a lot better after the Duchess nerf. It was one of the worst Evos, and now it's more average. The Evolved Goblin Giant, I would say, is an average evolution, significantly better than the regular Goblin Giant because of those goblins that spawn. In a lot of situations, especially if it's against a single targeting unit and not splash, those goblins are getting a significant amount of value and allowing you to get more pressure, making it harder for the opponent to defend the pushes. The Evolved Royal Giant, also quite a good evolution at the moment, definitely better than the regular RG because of the knockback. So if you play something like a Skeleton Army, Goblins, Mini Pekka, it's getting knocked back, damage is being dealt to it, so it forces you to use something else like either an air card or a building. The Evolved Firecracker, also I would say an average evolution. It's never going to be broken with how good the arrows are. That is why it is kind of average among the evolutions. I know mid-ladder players really, really hate her, but with arrows and void being as good as they are, and even poison fireball adequate counters to her as well, and because she activates the king tower, she's not as versatile as she could be for those reasons, but she is significantly better than the regular Firecracker, and she's definitely in an okay spot. The Evolved Wizard is a bit worse ever since his shield now can be taken off by Log and even the Zap. It makes him a bit more manageable to deal with in a lot of situations, so he has definitely seen a decrease in usage, which is why he's no longer in S tier. The Evolved Valkyrie, she's absolutely incredible, especially inside of Lava Hound decks. You could also use her in Hog X NATO, which we have seen making a return recently, and because of that small health boost she has, that kind of essentially guarantees she's getting a lot of value in some situations, even when her Tornado isn't doing a whole lot. The Evolved Goblin Drill is actually a bit worse ever since they removed that goblin. I have not been seeing it as much this month, and I think a big part of it actually is the Evolved Mortar being so much better after the Cannon Cart buff and Beatty cards coming back, because you can't really play the Evolved Mortar with the Evo Drill, so that kind of goes hand in hand. As more people have used the Evolved Mortar, there's less people running the Evolved Drill, so that is kind of why both of those go together, and that's why both of them are in A tier. The Evolved Mortar went way up because I believe last time I had it in C tier. It is now one of the better evolutions in the game for sure. Now getting into S tier, the Evolved Tesla. It's simply an S tier because whenever you play an Evo Tesla, you're basically guaranteed to defend no matter what is coming at you. It is just ridiculously broken. So essentially, when you have it down, it's just defense after defense every time because you're getting multiple stun waves and a death stun as well, which is just so helpful for so many interactions. The Evolved Knight, even after all the nerfs he has gotten, he has remained to still be one of the best evolutions in the game. I think a big part of it is because of that walking shield, so it's just so nice to have as a tank, or if you're defending something on defense, placing it next to your tower. Maybe it's something like an Archer Queen or Musketeer, and it just walks towards them and it's taking like no damage in the process, and it's so versatile inside of cycle decks, and even in heavier decks you can use him as well, like in Giant Graveyard, for example. The Evolved Skeletons, for only 1 elixir, they can sometimes get 10 elixir worth of value. They are especially good against Cannoneer decks, but even if you're against a non-Cannoneer deck, on defense, they can be absolutely OP if your opponent doesn't have a spell for them in cycle. They can completely annihilate a beatdown push, and it is just very situational. Sometimes they don't do much, but because they're only 1 elixir, you have so many opportunities to get value out of them throughout the match. The Evolved Zap is absolutely incredible inside of beatdown decks. Even after the nerf it has received, you still see it constantly, especially in heavy decks. Of course, with the Giant, you can use it. The Evolved Goblin Giant, Lava Hound, and there's probably some other things as well. Oh, Pekka is another really big one where you always are seeing the Evolved Zap in that typically. And it's just such a nice stun to have, and probably one of the reasons why the Inferno Drag as well as the Inferno Tower aren't as good as they normally are. And the Evolved Bomber, I believe, is probably the best evolution in the game at the moment. Even though they made it 2 cycles, it hasn't made a big difference. This thing is like literally a win condition, basically. When you have it with the Goblin Drill, the Evo Bomber and the Drill are both a win condition. You can get so much damage with both of them, playing it at the bridge, and even defensively, it's so solid because if you have a few units coming in that are kind of clumped together, you can go for the Evo Bomber in front, and it's going to bounce a bomb on top of all of them, dealing damage to them simultaneously. It's only 2 elixir. It pairs very well in so many things. I mean, it pairs well with the Tornado. You can use it without the Tornado, though. It's not even a requirement. You can use it in heavier decks like Lava Hound, and then cycle decks too, like of course the Goblin Drill, and just a ton of things. Mortar, it is a very versatile evolution and extremely strong as well. So this is my evolution ranking. Let me know what you guys think, and also the regular cards ranking. And if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe. If you guys are not subscribed already, you can also use creator code BOSS to support me in any Supercell game. And I really appreciate all the support on these tier list videos, as they do take me a while to make. But as long as you guys enjoy them, I plan on continue doing them. Thanks again. Until next time, guys.